First, a huge thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm honored to welcome you to this masterclass on better relationships and bigger impact, where we'll really focus on women, family, and philanthropy. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Danielle Patterson, CEO of Family Office List, and I could not be more excited to be with you all today, and am thrilled about introducing you to two extraordinary women who you may already know, Wendy Wexel and Amy Dornbush. They are bringing their incredible experience and insight to the intersection of philanthropy, family, and leadership. And this session is particularly special as Amy and Wendy will be sharing the insights they've never before presented. So I feel very honored to be the first, all of us, to receive this powerful workshop. And the timing is deeply personal for Wendy. I'm very excited she's going to talk to us about it. But, you know, today marks her Phoenix anniversary, which is a milestone in her journey of transformation. And they will dive into that. And before we get started, just a couple little housekeeping notes. For those of you who are new to our masterclass series, our goal is really to create a space for deep, meaningful discussions on topics that empower and elevate our community. Obviously today's session is no different, as we'll be exploring how philanthropy can be used as a tool, not just for impact, but strengthening family bonds and leadership potential across generations. I am actually going to launch a poll. We would love to know just a little bit about your experience in philanthropy. So I have launched that. Feel free, as I'm just going over other housekeeping notes, to participate. We'd love to hear from you. The chat functionality is enabled, so feel free, introduce yourselves, network if you would like. The Q&A is where I would ask that you drop any questions. Now, today's presentation there is a lot to go over. So if we do not have time at the end for your Q&A, but you have left one, we will make sure that Amy and Wendy follow up with you after the presentation. I am recording the presentation, so I'll follow up tomorrow with an email, and we'll also be sure to share information how you can get a hold and learn more from both Amy and Wendy. They'll follow up with you next week. We do a fun little incentive as a thank you to both our speakers and our participants. Our sponsor is Gift Suite. It's a boutique gifting agency, minority female-led, out of Los Angeles, and they just do the most amazing kind of eco-friendly gift baskets. So we'll be sending those to our speakers, and we'll pick one of the participants that's able to stay with us till the end. And I would love to just, touch, I know I shared the full bio on each of our amazing speakers, but just a little insight before we dive right in. Wendy Wexel is an impact-driven leader and relationship expert, known for her work in teaching leadership coaching to wealth-owning women who want to change the world. She's partnered with a wide array of influential figures and organizations, driving significant capital towards some of the globe's biggest challenges. And she is joined by Amy Dornbush, who brings over 2 decades of experience in venture investing, philanthropy, and hospitality. She's made a tremendous impact as a fundraising powerhouse, and her recent initiative, Atlas Daughters, aims to catalyze capital from philanthropists into innovative solutions led by and for women worldwide. So obviously very excited really to learn from their insights on how philanthropy not only drives impact, but strengthens relationships within families and community. So as to give our speakers as much time as possible, I will turn things over. Thank you and welcome, Amy and Wendy.
Thank you so much, Danielle. It is a pleasure to be here with both of you today. So thank you for making this conversation possible. And Wendy, I kick it off. I just have to say before we get started that I really do count my lucky stars every day for our partnership over this past year. And I'm just really excited to dig into this topic with you. So just to kick it off, if you wouldn't mind, I would love for you to just share a little bit about your practice and what drives or motivates you about your work, and also a little backstory about how we first met as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mentioned this before the call formally started, but, the timing of this is very, very kismet for me. And I think it was a year ago where we met. And then 2 years ago, where things really took a toll. Things were, I call it my Phoenix anniversary. And, you know, I do the work that I do, and I started my business about 5 years ago because I was called to do it. I sat down with someone with two hours of total experience, 0 training, and I changed their life. And I knew that this was it. And I had already been an entrepreneur at this point, and it's just been putting one foot in front of the other. And so why this work? And so the EQ of wealth is something that is really created from what I call my own legacy magic. And so what normally there's the IQ, and the IQ is philanthropy, it's investing. We have people on this call. So that poll is very helpful who, they give regularly, they have family foundations, they are philanthropists. That's all I call the IQ. The EQ is the emotional side. It's how it affects relationships. And so why do I even do this? Well, my story, and this is me and my grandfather at my bat mitzvah.
I love this
Oh,
picture of you, by the way.
Oh my gosh, you're
At
amazing.
my bat mitzvah. And I love my grandfather, and he gave me, I inherited money from him at 21 years old, and I was deeply unprepared for it. And so my story is that I messed it up. I never even knew how much I inherited. I just know that 7 years later it was gone. And I saw, in other families, that same thing. And so I created something that I wish I had, because here's the thing. So 2 years ago today was my Phoenix anniversary. What does that mean? The Phoenix is when everything burns to the ground and it has to rise again. So every part of my life burned. Relationship, housing. I was supposed to move to Paris. I'm actually here today. So when I say the legacy magic framework, this is literally what I created for myself to rebuild my life and so to figure out how I can most be of service in the world. And so, it's really this blend of the personal, what have I overcome? So what am I uniquely positioned to do? Well, I know the story of inheritance, and I know when it doesn't go well. And I also know professionally, I've worked within organizations. I've led organizations. I've been incredibly successful at fundraising and as a founder of myself. And I saw that with other families, it was always, typically, I will say 90% of the time, it was fear and relationships that got in the way of decisions being made. And so the EQ of wealth is what I call my legacy magic, because it's something that should exist, in the potential of what should exist but didn't. And so actually, EQ of wealth is about the love of moving capital, but it's also because it's about getting rid of the barriers of what tends to prohibit capital from being moved, which is relationships and then fear. With that said, it is also deeply based in family and a deep love of family. And the reason that my grandfather is also on that photo, and I share it with you today, is because I am deeply proud of the family I come from. And, family is something that is also core to everything that we do in philanthropy. And, that's just, a little bit about me and, how the work has evolved. So legacy magic, like, the EQ of wealth was, really came about 2 years ago through this Phoenix anniversary, which is today, of my life burning to the ground. And then 1 year later, so 1 year ago today, I met Amy Dornbush, and we met through a collective of incredible, fearless, bold women, part of Maverick Collective, which commit $1 million to reproductive health around the world. Just an incredible group. And I was so lucky that Amy and I were introduced to a fellow member of that community. And I was at that time leading a coaching group called Capital and Connection, which is very relevant to what we're talking about today. And, that connection, that family piece is also something that is so deeply important to Amy. And so when we were part of that coaching cohort, and I was leading it and Amy was a part of it, but I say part of it together because it's all about partnership. We really do have a deep partnership. And when she told me about Atlas Daughters, and this is the framework of legacy magic, I was like, Amy, this is it for you. This is truly your personal, professional, and potential coming together. It should exist in the world. And so I'm just really curious with Atlas Daughters, a transformative travel company for women who deeply care about philanthropy, like how has family shaped you in your journey and also shaped the creation of Atlas Daughters, which I'm just so deeply grateful to be part of.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I suppose that without going too far into the history, I should just start with this field journey that I took to Zimbabwe, because that's really sort of the genesis and the origin story of how Atlas Daughters came to be, also in partnership with working with Wendy and trying to identify what the next big thing for myself was going to be. So I went on this trip. I'm just going to advance a slide here with my mother and also with my daughter Ruby, who was 6 years old at the time. And this was a cross-generational philanthropic experience that we took together. So during this trip, we went to visit an NGO that we partner with pretty significantly, which is called We Care Solar. And We Care Solar's mission and our partnership with them is really bringing life-saving solar electricity to last mile birthing clinics across sub-Saharan Africa. So our family was very involved with bringing solar electricity to every last mile birthing clinic in Zimbabwe. And part of the reason why I decided to bring my daughter is I had 3 kids ages 6 and under. And my husband's like, wait, so you're going to leave me with all 3 kids for 10 days? And I said, I'm going to bring her and my mom's going to come and we're going to do this across 3 generations. We're going to have this incredible experience together. So there's a lot more that came before that, and there's a lot more that came after that. But during this experience, it was really a light bulb moment for me, and it planted the seed for both thinking about and evolving the way that I approach not just family philanthropy, but also partnership philanthropy, which we're going to talk a little bit more about as we get further into the conversation. But just some I want to skip ahead to this slide actually, because it really shows that these are some beautiful pictures that I took with my daughter Ruby in one of these last mile clinics that we were visiting. This is one of the last solar installations we did in our countrywide tour. So she was really involved in seeing what these community health centers are like, meeting the community health workers. She got to experience how we actually do a solar electricity installation and participate in that as well, in addition to actually witnessing a rural birth, which was quite exciting. And so this was really a transformational experience for all 3 of us, but I really wanted to bring my daughter into the world of philanthropy and really understand the work that I do and get to see it firsthand. And what blossomed out of this trip was really quite an amazing thing. And so when we got back from our trip, we returned, I spent a day with her peer kindergarten class, and she insisted that I sit in the back of the room, but I watched her give a 45-minute slide presentation by herself. She was 6 to her school. It was incredible. And I had tears in my eyes, and I had to hold myself back from wanting to jump in and contribute to the presentation, but she really did it on her own. And I was so amazed at how much she absorbed from this experience that we had together. And she was very well prepared, and she spoke in a way that she understands about how solar electricity works. She shared some of her experiences. She even shared some words in one of the 16 native languages to Zimbabwe that she had learned. And we speak about our experience together almost weekly. So it really was incredible. And now she understands really intrinsically the work that her mom does, but she really wants to be involved. So I'll go back to just this one slide. I mean, this is our guiding mission for Atlas Daughters, is really when journey inspires legacy. So when we bring our family members along with us to experience the work that we do, it just unlocks the potential for what the families can do together. So that's the genesis of the work that we're doing with Atlas Daughters. And I'll just share that, Atlas Daughters really has 3 objectives. So the primary objective for this social venture is really a strong motivational desire for how we show up not only as a family, but as a capital resource and as a formalized family foundation, on how we can really show up for our nonprofit partners that we work with, how we can leverage our resources and create an opportunity to really catalyze funds into their projects. I really have done a lot of work personally in thinking about how we can show up as and sort of go beyond the checkbook, right? So how we can show up to really partner. And this was my answer to that, right? So and our team have created this incredible opportunity where we can bring other like-minded family offices and foundations with us to join the work that we're doing and catalyze and bring about even more funding. So that's the first motivational objective. The second objective is really family philanthropy. So our proprietary curriculum connects these concepts of global impact, family philanthropy, and girls' leadership and development, specifically for school-aged children. In part selfishly motivated because I have school-aged children, but also because it doesn't exist. So I created this for my daughter based off of our experiences together, and I really wanted to bring it to others. So that's the genesis of the curriculum, is really what I was teaching Ruby when we were on this trip together. And lastly, and definitely not least, the third objective is really about building bonds between mothers and their daughters through philanthropy. So this is how I live my life, and it's been transformational in creating a richer life, if you will, that blends our work and our values and our relationships into one. So that's how we're here today, and I'm excited to be able to share more of that work with you. So this is a good transition point, and speaking about relationships. So Wendy, I want to bring you back into the conversation. So Wendy, if you could just talk to us a little bit about how your work and interest in relationships has really led you into the philanthropy space. This is interesting, and it was an organic evolution. So if you'd be willing to share.
It was an organic evolution, and this was me about 12 years ago. So I will say I never wanted to work in philanthropy. That was never the goal. I started out in film, and I worked a lot in corporate. I did everything I basically did everything for a film festival that didn't involve seeing movies. And so a lot of it was corporate and business development, and a lot of it was working with corporations and raising corporate dollars from some of the biggest brands. But I actually found it to being highly transactional. And I was working with, talent, this and that, but ultimately I fell into philanthropy because I just loved the conversations I was having with people. And I wanted to talk to people about, how their kids were doing and what their dreams were and what the issue of education. And that was the first organization I got involved with, was an international education organization called Pencils of Promise, around, how do they, and actually it was all about bringing multiple generations into the giving, into the experience, because it's education and they understand it. And so it was interesting when I started in development, I actually didn't understand what they were saying, because I was like, from the film background, it's about developing scripts and stories and like creating things. And I just said, what are we developing here? And ultimately developing of relationships. And, and I think that, when you're talking about philanthropy, family office, family foundations, it's about relationships, and it's about relationships with people. And I was actually talking to a dear friend of mine who also works a lot with a large amount of family offices. And it's true, it's about trust. It's like, what's your vision and where's the trust? And you have to, and it's by no coincidence that these things are called, when you're talking about passing something down, it's called a trust fund, because it is ultimately about trusting that the thing that you pass down. And so, it's, and having that trust is, and having those trust in relationships in families is also what gets in the way of people making decisions. They don't know. I mean, I've experienced this personally, but it's also, I don't want to speak to my spouse, or like, oh, we're going to have this argument again. And like, I don't feel comfortable speaking about this in front of my dad. It's a very relational thing. And actually, once you're actually able to hold on to the relational piece, just in terms of, I know we're talking about like soft things, but we're, the EQ Evolved, and what Amy and I are talking about is the love of moving capital. And so, this work, being able to teach someone how to actually use their voice. I worked with someone and they moved $100 million in 2 days for climate change because she could actually, have the courage and the ability to advocate for what she believed in front of her family and families like hers, because all of this work that I've seen in this very niche world of, family office list, family foundation, is peer-to-peer. If you're really trying to raise capital, it's all peer-to-peer. And, that is, and so how do you actually influence your peers? And so, Amy, you really know about this firsthand. You're really a champion and fearless at this. And so I'm really curious about your experience and what you learned working within a family office and how families can work together to create a really meaningful impact.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've worked within a loose family office structure for over a decade. So like many of you on this call know, family offices are complex. And in that framework, it offered me opportunities to gain experience across a wide variety of areas, which included operating a family business, managing an investment fund, and also running our foundation. So a lot of you on this call will understand this, but I recently, this was last year, actually, I was on a retreat with Women's Alzheimer's Association, and they had a workshop that was led by a death doula, which was fascinating. I didn't even know what a death doula was going into this workshop, but this is somebody who has spent several hundred days of her life with people during their last days of life, and shared with us, all of these poignant kind of takeaways from her experience, which all kind of culminates into, what are we going to remember at the end? What is success? What is true wealth? And I recently read that someone had said that, true wealth is your adult kids wanting to spend time with you. And I just loved that, because I think that it really sums up, you can't take all of this with you, right? And you can't take all this stuff with you. And so money is really a tool that we can use to build and nurture relationships. So if we're looking at this graphic that Wendy and I put together, and this is really something that I think about a lot. This is fancy language for what we all kind of know in the words of Susie Orman is, save, spend, give, right? So these are the categories of what we can do with our wealth. And it's really, one bucket is, well, we're going to preserve and we're going to grow it. So that's saving, it's investing, it's some of these traditional wealth vehicles and asset classes that we have within our family offices. We also have the give bucket, which is what we do with our wealth when we can share it. So it's charity, it's philanthropy, that can find itself anywhere along this spectrum, which we presented to you in the poll, which can start with, on one side of the spectrum, it's really just, giving sort of personally and relationship based, and all the other side of the spectrum is that really formalized, structured, foundational type of giving. And then lastly, it's the spend, right? So what do we do with our wealth that enhances our life experiences and also our relationships? And at the center of that is what I like to call the new philanthropy. So this is really where we are intersecting in all of those areas, in experiences and what we do with our wealth in ways that can eliminate all of these silos. So, very specifically and related to Atlas Daughters, I mean, this is, impact travel and experiences. So what we do with our families that allow us to create experiences and lifelong memories together, but also we're learning, and where we have the opportunity to really provide service and to engage in ways that taps into our philanthropy. So family offices are really uniquely situated in these areas because it's an emphasis on social and also monetary profits across all of our family entities and our assets. It's also where partnership philanthropy comes into play. So as we look across all of our relationships, our networks, our assets, and what we do with this wealth, we're really uniquely situated to bring all of these different areas together, and families are poised to live in this space. And it's really alignment in for and nonprofit investments. So starting to think about those things together. That is really, we're actually going to be talking a lot about this concept at Climate Week next week, which is sort of what some people are starting to refer to as philanthropy 4.0. So philanthropy 4.0 is really diving into complex global problems that require systemic solutions, and those are going to require both for and nonprofit entities working in tandem together. So a great example of that, I'm actually speaking with Matt Damon. I'm excited, Matt Damon, on this next week, which is really where water.org plays. So Matt Damon and Gary White are really actively involved in this philanthropy 4.0, which is the for and nonprofit entities working together. So that's water.org being the nonprofit solution, really solving for the water crisis, and Water Equity, which is their for-profit investment class that invites philanthropists and investors alike to contribute to investing in assets that are also solving for the water issue, but that are also delivering financial returns. So that's just something really interesting that we'll dive into. And then moving on to this next graphic, which may be interesting to you, and this is something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, and also with Wendy, is that wealth is really a tool for building stronger family relationships. So this slide shows what I'll call the 4 E's of bonding. So this is an adaptation that came from Jay Shetty, which many of you may be familiar on his 5 E's of intimacy. So this is also adapted from what some of you may know as a bonding ladder. So these are the things that we can do with our partners and also our family members that allow us to build stronger and more intimate relationships. So those 4 E's are experiences, and Atlas Daughters really plays in the intersection in the middle of all of these things and brings all of these things together with our journeys, which is we can have experiences together. So that could be something as simple as Netflix and chill. We're going to stay in with, have a movie night together. We're going to go to a comedy show. Experiencing new things together. It can also be travel. Education, that's learning something new together, right? So, and I had the great fortune with my family to be able to go and spend a couple of days with the Gates Foundation, where we were all learning how we think about family philanthropy and the sort of the building blocks of foundations. This was 10 years ago, and we were really formalizing what our foundation was going to look like. So we were all learning together. This was all new for us. Entertainment, again, this is the comedy show. I mean, being driven to laughter and being entertained together. Those are things that bring us closer together. And lastly, it's engagement. So that's service. That's going, volunteering together or going on a field immersion trip. When we're able to bring opportunities for us to serve together and to contribute to something that's larger than ourselves, that's really that in conjunction with all of the other 3 things that I just mentioned is really where we can start to build very profound family bonds together. And again, family offices are just really well suited for these types of experiences. So wealth is a tool for building and nurturing and really maintaining strong family philanthropy and family relationships is what drives my work. So on that topic of family and relationships, Wendy, I'd love to kick it back to you again. And I'd love to dig in a little bit deeper into your work on the science of relationships and how this contributes to what I just discussed about transition points and the complications of working with family and loved ones.
That could be a whole other webinar. Amy. That could be a retreat.
Sure.
Part 2 to be continued.
To be continued. Yeah. So, we're talking about philanthropy. We're talking about, seeing the big picture, building bonds, but ultimately, working with family is always complex. And and this is, I think there's a real misunderstanding around how relationships work, and that it's a soft science, and it's actually quite a hard science. And we're very lucky to be alive right now because we have so much research into what actually makes relationships last. And so if you're able to follow the research and the tools and actually the biology, and I'm going to talk about our nervous system, as a daughter of two doctors, like a daughter and granddaughter of doctors, so I'll be very proud. But, there is a real science to this. And so first, the thing that I just want to point out very quickly is that one of the reasons why it's so complicated to work with family is because we love them so much. And so why is that complicated? Because the people we love the most will rock our nervous system the hardest and the fastest. And so what does that mean? That means that a conversation turns into a confrontation exponentially faster, because your body is having a biological stress response. And so when we're having the conversation around relationships, we also need to have a conversation around our nervous system and being in, stress response and getting to rest and digest, as well as the importance based on the research around why they matter. And so one of the other things that I think is really important, and I'm actually trained by the Gottman Institute. They are my heroes, and they're doctors John and Julie Gottman. They're married, and one of the most famous things that they found is this thing called the magic ratio, and I think it's very important. And it's really about an interactions game. Relationships are an interactions game, and so what does that mean? That means that it's the small moments that matter way more than the big moments. And so you really need to show up in all the small moments, because we have a negativity bias, which means that negative experiences and interactions hit us a lot harder. This is why we can have a great day, but if someone says something to us that really ticks us off, it really ruins our day. It's because our nervous system and what we actually process, the negativity is just weighted much greater. So what does that mean? Well, we're looking at ratios. So this is the science of great relationships. So in great relationships, when you're not when you are sort of just going through your day, it is actually a 20-to-1 ratio. What does that mean? It is 20 interactions, positive interactions, to a negative interaction. And an interaction is literally just nodding your head, like acknowledging someone else. It's putting, a hand on someone's shoulder, saying that you're with them. It could also just be a non-response, which could be a negative interaction, or it could be checking your phone, which is a negative interaction, or it could be a very much an against of saying, criticism, which is toxic for relationships. So if you're and I will say this again, and there's no room for criticism in relationships, because it's basically cancer. And criticism is one of the things that really, really destroys relationships. And so in order for a relationship to feel great, it has to have in a non sort of conflict scenario, 20-to-1, but in conflict, in a tough situation, the positive interactions still have to be so much more weighted. So it's still 5-to-1, even when you're like not seeing the same way, and you're having discussions around, we see this fund, we see investing in this very differently, or, we see our kids going to different schools, or we want to live in different places, whatever these issues are. And by the way, 69% of issues in relationships will not go away. So if you think that issues will go away, they probably won't. You just have to learn how to manage them. And so you really have to take your time in the small moments to show up for people. And I actually find that to be very optimistic, because it's actually in the small moments where we can positively change our lives. We don't need to be doing these huge things. We actually just need to be acknowledging the person across the room and saying, hey, how you doing? And then at the second time, just in terms of the importance of relationships and why they matter to our lives, well, they actually increase our lifespan. And so one of the most famous studies of all, in relationships, in life thriving, is a ongoing study that came out of Harvard that started in the 1930s around, really studying, it was, white men. So it was a subset, but at the same time, it's a very long study of tracking people. And, this is a quote from a TED Talk. And by the way, we're going to be offering and follow up next Tuesday a list of all these references. The people who were the most satisfied in their relationships at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80, because relationships, and this is why we have, the Surgeon General in the US declared a pandemic around loneliness. It's because relationships are directly correlated to lifespan. And so when we're talking about relationships, I want you to know there is a science, and it's, make sure you know how to calm down. And we could talk through that another time, because it's about those arguments. When we look at, because our negative experiences are weighted so much more heavily, those arguments have incredibly negative repercussions. And also, the reason why philanthropy is so positive for relationships is because it gets us out of the day-to-day. And the philanthropic journey is me to we to mission. It is, what am I getting out of this? What are we doing together? And what is bigger than ourselves? And it's most meaningful and most purposeful when we're at the mission side. And then when we're tackling philanthropy, we're tackling issues. We're tackling human behavior. We're tackling, the fact that the world is always changing. So things like climate change, AI, and transition points. And so in those transition points, we really need to figure out how to work together. It's all collaborative. And so this is also, and I'm sure this is a topic that's come up again and again at the with family office list, is the transition of the great wealth transfer. And this is, I say for women, inheritance is liberation, because we couldn't inherit always. This is a real moment where we're going to have a seat at the table, and, and have that inclusivity. And so, Amy, this is where I know this is the moment for you and the moment for Atlas Daughters. And I would love for you to talk through the transition that we're in with the great wealth transfer, and how women and people can really reach this moment, meet this moment that we're in.
Yeah, well, this is an incredible time that we're living in right now, especially as a woman who is very involved with collective giving and working with other women in philanthropy. I mean, there is a huge amount of wealth that's about to come down the pipeline. I mean, there was a study that that just came out a couple of months ago from McKinsey, and many of you probably have already read about this, and it's sort of it's topic du jour, but it's about the great transfer of wealth. And so the vast majority of $30 trillion is about to pass into women's hands in the next 5 years. And it represents an enormous opportunity for women in families to really think about and step up to the plate and have a seat at the table when thinking about how to move capital and how they can participate. The other thing that's really important to think about when we're thinking about how women give is, we know that women give differently than men do, and it's not better or worse, it's just different. And so what we know is women are far more likely to give and to engage in moving capital when they do it with other women. So this is collective giving. This is another stat. Collective giving is on the rise. So in the United States, just in the last 5 years, via around 4,000 different collective giving groups, which are popping up everywhere, there was over $3 billion of capital that was moved into the philanthropic space. And the vast majority of those 4,000 collective giving groups were participated in and also led by women. So, and we'll send you the study for that too next week. But I want to share a story, because it's just it's something that I'm very proud of, and it's also just it's staggering. So this was during the fall of Kabul. Myself and some of the women that I'm actively engaged in conversation with around philanthropic giving and really engaging around women leaders, also in partnership with Vital Voices, we had a call to action from Vital Voices, which is an organization that really supports and creates leadership opportunities for women leaders around the world. And there was a list that was published by the Taliban, and it was a kill list for women leaders in Afghanistan. There were 1,100 women leaders on that list. And we had, in the span of 7 days, to try and get those women out of Kabul. And in the span of 7 days, I did not sleep. In collaboration with a bunch of women and just that I know and also don't know. We had kind of this viral email that went around, and phone calls from Black Ops groups on the ground in Kabul that we're working with. We raised $12 million in 7 days, and we evacuated 1,100 of these women leaders by chartering private planes. And the cost of those private planes, started at $50,000 or $100,000, and in the last couple of days it was $500,000. And we did it, and it was an incredible effort with some of these Black Ops groups on the ground, and women. Just this is a perfect case study of trust-based philanthropy and collective giving. Women show up and they believe in each other, and they don't have the time. We didn't have the luxury of being able to review proposals or to send it through the rungs of authority and approval processes and things like this. I mean, we needed women to show up to the plate and to write checks, and that is what we did. And that was a little over a year ago, or it was a year ago, I guess. That it was October, right? It was a year ago. I'm happy to report that we have permanently resettled all but 9 of those 1,100 women leaders, and they're now starting their own NGOs. They're working in government positions. They're working at the Georgetown Leadership for Women. It relied on a group of women to be transparent with each other, to trust each other, to trust the group that we had on the ground, and to come together collectively and make it happen. So I'm not saying we can do that kind of thing every week, but it is an incredible case study nonetheless of what happens when you have trust and alignment and capital and women at the table. So there's that. And then the other thing that I just want to mention too, because this is sort of at the crux of what the work that we're doing with Atlas Daughters and our philanthropic journeys, where we're bringing mothers and daughters together to go on these incredibly impactful immersion trips, but also to partner with nonprofits and fund some of these really bold projects that we're working on, is that 2 out of the 5 top priorities for Millennial and Gen Z women are impact investing and travel. So we are meeting them literally where they are, right? They know how to use their wealth to enhance their life experiences, which is travel and all the other things, right? But also let's use the wealth that we have as a tool to do better and to do more and to create impact. So again, there are no wrong answers. This is just my answer of what I'm working on. But you all have the ability and assets across your family offices to show up for these to show up in these ways too. So I think that's a great transition point, Wendy, for us to go into the work that Wendy and I have co-authored, a sort of a model of what evolving philanthropy looks like, and how we evolve kind of the way that we think about traditional philanthropy, and where the white space and opportunity is in sort of this moment that we're in, where we're talking about families working together and more inclusive philanthropy, the great wealth transfer, all of these things, which we'll kind of go into more deeply, and in which both with Wendy's work that she's done with families and interpersonal relationships, and the work that I've done sort of coming from more of a traditional family office framework, that we can really speak to. So Wendy, if you wouldn't mind starting and kind of introducing our tool. This is something new, and it brings our experience and our expertise, and also working together, that we created this. But let's kind of start with some of the more interpersonal aspects of disrupting philanthropy.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And by the way, this is a Family Office List exclusive. So this is a first look.
Amazing. Thank you.
And I just want to say, this is really coming from a place of love of capital and family, and how do they all coexist? So, the traditional, what I talked about earlier, traditional philanthropy is really about what's the money and where is it going? But in order for it to actually be a tool of how families come together and bond, you have to include the IQ, which is the traditional side, and the EQ, which I, call the emotional and relational side. They both need to be integrated, and you both need to be able to be skilled in order for families to be sophisticated. in how to create these long-term investments. And then the family view of money. This is a big one. So, you know, I grew up in a family where we didn't talk about it, and that had its own set of repercussions. But, you know, it's really and then I'm going to come back to, and this is, you know, to Brené Brown, where it's shame exists in a petri dish of basically like you don't speak, and so of opaqueness. And so, you know, when you have traditionally it's top down, we're making decisions, but in the future, like we're talking about with collective giving, it's how does everyone come together, and that's why once again the EQ is so important because it's relational, and you know, with who is a philanthropist, and this is, you know, the term philanthropist is an interesting term, but it's like, who is actually leading the charge? And so, you know, where decisions were typically made were who, you know, had the decision-making power historically, which has been older white men, and we love all men, but, you know, now it's about everyone, you know, everyone has a different lived experience, and we'll get to it later, but also the communities have incredible expertise, which we'll talk about. And so how are we, and talking about philanthropy 4.0, really creating a holistic model of encapsulating everything. And then, you know, this idea of next gen, and next gen is a term that's thrown out with like, what is the next generation? And so traditionally, this is something that has been about usually people that are ready to inherit, and their adult children, but you know, especially I think young people, children, and this is something that we really believe in with Atlas Daughters, like everyone has a voice and everyone certainly has a cell phone for better or worse, and everyone has an incredible perspective. And, you know, I think that we have so much to learn from our children. And you know, they haven't been on this planet for as long as we have, and they have incredible opportunities and possibilities and ideas, and we need to honor that and include them in that, especially since they're going to be inheriting a lot of the challenges that we have created. And then, power dynamics. So this is such a big one in relationships. So, you know, I say that power dynamics are basically when one person sacrifices their needs for another. And you know, the person with more power has, like, basically everyone reports into, and everyone else has to sort of compensate and sort of sacrifice. And traditionally, you know, whoever's the funding has the power, and that's not going to be the way moving forward. It's going to be about, we need to really honor the communities, we need to really honor the governments. And the thing that I say again and again is that impact is a team sport. You know, typically for-profit models, you know, you do, you know, scale there is your public company, let's say, you've made it. In impact and in philanthropy, you're dealing with public sector. Your programs are scaling through government solutions. So we really need to make sure that we are collaborating. And fundraising is something that Amy and I can both speak to, but, you know, we both deeply approach, you know, we think it's a deeply important practice, as well as we approach it in a way that's hugely relational and therefore effective. So I say that, you know, typically, you know, it's, you know, I would say traditional sales approach would be, we're just looking to who has money, but it's a matchmaking. All fundraising is a matchmaking with money. You don't want to find the money, you want to find your people, because then when you have the right people, it is just so easy for it to work and for it to be long lasting. And Amy, you know, I'd love for you to really be brought into the conversation, because you know, you're fearless at fundraising. You know, just some things she didn't say was she's, in the last 13 months, has raised over $30 million for cancer research. I mean, this is really about, you know, I just want to say all of this is coming from a love of what capital can do, and then including it. And so Amy, you know, what anything you would like to add to the fundraising, for the fundraising approach, and then I'll let you go through the rest, because you know, you really have an incredible expertise there.
Sure. Well, first of all, I didn't do that alone. So talking about, I mean, partnerships, you know, it's that's, yes. I mean, let's not forget that. But I would say, I mean, just, I love what you say, matchmaking, fundraising is matchmaking with money. So don't find the money, find your people. And, you know, if you build it, they will come, kind of a mentality. So I love that. And I think that, you know, going into the donor profile, and many of you, you know, being part of family offices and you know, investment entities being part of that, you'll understand and you'll know this motto of spray and pray, right? Which is just you just kind of take the money wherever you can get it and hope that something happens. I think that, again, market dynamics come into play here as well, of course, but, moving into this idea of venture philanthropy, where you think about in a venture investing environment, where, entrepreneurs, provided that there's a lot of money out there, they're not just looking for money wherever they can get it. I mean, they're really looking at bringing value beyond the checkbook and creating partnerships, right? And so we're starting to see more of that alignment, particularly as we go into this era of philanthropy 4.0, which I touched on earlier, where you really have these complex systems that combine nonprofit entities and for-profit entities that are working towards a common goal. The donor profile or the investor profile becomes an important part of that, right? Who are your people? Who's going to partner with you and elevate and bring scale so that we can ultimately solve for some of these complex problems? And then going, decision makers, again, this is sort of the traditional philanthropist, where it's a top-down approach. You have a patriarch or a wealth creator in combination with some appointed staff that are really making the decisions about where the money is going. And, these are just in terms of grant structure, that's more, a traditional restricted grant, right? I'm the donor. I have an idea of cause and effect. I know where I want my money to go. And I'm actually going to define parameters of how it gets deployed. Versus where we're moving into a much more, democratic era, where the decision makers are all family members, supporting staff, advisors, bringing somebody like Wendy to the table. We have more of a democratic approach. And what many, big name philanthropists like Mackenzie Scott are starting to do is to create a consortium of experts, right? Where you have areas of interest that concern you and your family, but you also recognize that you don't have all of the answers. So you start to build a board of, advisors, if you will, that can really weigh in from an expertise standpoint. And then in terms of engagement, this is how families and foundations really engage with the NGO partners that you're working with. The old way is very metrics based. It's written reports. There's donor mandated, reporting framework. The new way is, and where I'm really urging people to move in this direction, is partnerships. It's more fluid, right? So you're more involved with the partners, you're doing field immersions, you're learning about the work, you're becoming an advocate and an expert yourself, and you're sharing your network and all of the assets and resources that you have with your nonprofit partners so that they can do better. And just recognizing that that's an evolving process, right? There's no beginning and end necessarily. And that feeds into the transparency. So again, we're moving into this collective giving era, where the old way may have been private grant making. The new way is collective grant making. So we're going to do this together. There's a tangible problem that we're trying to solve for, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's more risk tolerant. We don't know all the answers, but let's do it together. I mean, we've seen that with the Afghan anecdote that I shared with you, which is really, our investments become de-risked when we do it together. And when we see that other philanthropists are making bold investments and really stepping up to the plate with large amounts of contributions. Lastly, it's ROI, right? So we're going from something that may have been finite. So we have a report, that's the end of our grant. We have our name on a building. Thank you very much. Moving into an evolution, evolving, fluid sort of where are we getting to, which is more casual and close engagement with the nonprofit leaders. And we don't necessarily have an end per se, but we're learning and we're evolving. So that's, and we're going to be doing a lot of speaking about this at Climate Week. And I know that we're coming to an end here, but I hopefully just looking at this sort of framework and where we're going and where the white space is, I hope that this sparks some new ideas for you and your family office and how you can think about philanthropy differently and bring it into practice.
Wow. If I could give a standing ovation. I'm already standing. I have a standing desk. That was so amazing, both of you. I've got like goosebumps, tears. Yeah, just so honored that you shared this all with us today. The chat's been going crazy. I'll make sure you can see because there were lots of questions in the chat. Now I know we have 5 minutes remaining. Wendy or Amy, do you have anything more to say, or would you like to open it up to Q&A?
Well, I think each of
I
us have
actually think it would be
takeaways.
helpful, Wendy. I know that you have a couple of points that are your takeaways. If you want anyone to remember something, what are your 3 key takeaways? And by the way, to Danielle's point, all of these questions, we will answer them even if we don't do them here. So we see your questions and we will follow up with you. But Wendy, 3 things. We just threw a lot of content at
I know we
everyone.
threw a lot of content at you. Okay, so first off, who's from the first slide, but legacy magic. You know, what have you personally overcome? What do you professionally know? And what is the potential of what should exist, but doesn't? In that middle is where you can make the biggest difference in the world based on the thing that is your special sauce. Philanthropy means love of man in Latin, the love of mankind. Relationships have to be at the center for it to be effective. And then the last is fundraise. And I know people on family office lists are fundraising. Like fundraising is matchmaking with money. It's not about finding money. It's about finding your people and the money will flow. So those are my 3 key takeaways. Amy, I'm going to throw it to you.
Yeah, so again, this is a family office environment. So family offices are uniquely positioned to find ways to collaborate across all of your entities and assets, while also contributing to, impact and strengthening your bonds with your family at the same time. So remove the silos and try to see how you can collaborate and how the people and businesses and nonprofits that are all in your network can actually work together and can meet each other and create opportunities for them to spark new ideas, because that's where innovation flows. Secondly, I just, again, as a mom to young kids, start philanthropy early or thinking about impact, right? So if you really want to engage with women, if you really want to engage during this transfer of wealth, you better know how and why the value of philanthropy can bring to families and to yourself. So let's create that family conversation and start with your kids. And there's lots of ways to do that. And then lastly, it's not just a nice to have to incorporate this practice of trust-based philanthropy into your foundation work. It's a duty, and I really believe this. It's a duty and a responsibility of family foundations and offices and individuals to have a risk-tolerant and collaborative and venture-minded approach to philanthropy, because it fills the gap of where public and large funding sources can't fill. So just remember that. Be risk tolerant, be collaborative, have a venture-minded and partnership mindset, because the larger funding sources, they just can't pivot that quickly.
I just want to say yes to that as someone who's also worked in philanthropy. Like, I just want to just double down on what Amy just said as a closing point. Philanthropic dollars are incredibly effective for risk tolerant or especially early stage investments. And so there is a huge opportunity there.
Wow, this has been so insightful. Well, as they mentioned, feel free. We didn't necessarily have the time for Q&A, but if you really want either Amy or Wendy to follow up, please feel free, drop those in. We'll be sharing all the chat, all the Q&A. I can't thank you both enough for just an amazing, insightful, inspiring conversation. And thank you everyone who showed up. And yeah, please, I think the best thing we can do is share this recording with others who can work with us to make a difference.
And Danielle, I just want to say that, one of the biggest things we can give in general is our time. It's the one thing you don't get back. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined, especially on this call. And Tuesday is when Amy and I are going to be following up with everyone. So just want to thank you for your engagement, and your questions will be answered.
Amazing. Well, I have drawn Annie Winger, I'm sorry, Annie I drew your name at random. Thank you. Thank you everyone for participating. I'll follow up with you to send a little gift suite.
If it's my friend Annie, I hope it's my friend Annie.
I hope so too, for your sake. Well, thank you everyone. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. I know my spirits are lifted. I'm very inspired. So thank you for that.
Thank you, everyone.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Have a great day, everyone.